This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Hello, world, and welcome to episode 246 of Geek Leader Podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. Today's sponsor is A2 Hosting. I've been using A2 Hosting solid-state hosting solutions for our website at geekleader.com for many, many years now, and absolutely love their support, their service, and all the features that you get. You get access to cPanel. You get all of the things that you can imagine for a great WordPress experience, including their A2 optimized WordPress, which does extra security checks, extra lockdown. You can lock down your editor file so you can't edit anything inside there. You get alerts whenever there are file changes that are done. You can also do automatic updates, backups, and more with A2 Hosting. So highly recommend it. Go to geekleader.com/A2 to get more information and to sign up for their solid state turbocharged speed hosting today. Again, that's geekleader.com/A2. All right, Geek Leaders. Today on the show, I've got Simon Kardynal, and he is the host of Trench Leadership Podcast, a podcast from the front, and he's calling from Ottawa, Canada, and he's retired with 26 years of experience as a leader from the Canadian Air Forces, Armed Forces, and he's a Master Warrant Chief. Awesome to have our military folks on the show. I love to hear leadership stories from the military. So with all that being said, Simon, welcome to the show.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me, John. I'm really happy to be here, and thanks for taking the time for this. It's fantastic.
Yeah, so if you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about how you got to where you are today and why leadership is so important to you.
Yeah, of course. Well, if you don't mind, first, I'd like to start by saying, by getting rid of a couple of those Canadian myths that are out there. First and foremost, none of us say a boot.
Nobody, yeah.
Nobody says a boot. It does sound like about, but no one says a boot. I actually don't like maple syrup, so please don't tell anyone. No, that could be a problem in the Canadian industry. But poutines are very tasty. That's a true fact. So that's all good.
All right.
So I just felt I needed to put that out there, put some of those myths to rest.
I hear you.
Yeah. But so for me, how I got to this point, it's a bit of a story. I'll try and Cole's notes it as best as I can. So I was 19 years old, and I decided I was going to join the military. So I actually started in the Canadian Army. I started as an infantry soldier, and I was 19 years old, and like most young 19-year-old men, I thought I knew everything, and no one was going to tell me otherwise. I was pretty immature, and that's okay. I'm content to admit that now that I just turned 47. And so I did that for 4 or 5 years. That was a lot of fun. And in the Canadian military, there's a program where you can switch your trades and do different stuff. So I switched over to the Canadian Air Force, the Royal Canadian Air Force, and I became what was called an aircraft structures technician. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like auto body, but very loosely connected. We do a lot of metal fabrication and declomania, refinishing. You get you get the idea.
Yeah.
So I did that for a bunch. I got posted all around the country, which was great. And eventually, in 2007, I was promoted to the first supervisory rank, junior rank level. It's called Master Corporal. And I started moving up the rank structure from there. And in the trade that I was in, when everyone gets promoted to the rank of warrant officer, all of the air maintenance trades, and there are 5 of them, we all become what's called an aircraft maintenance superintendent. And the reasoning behind that is I'm now really an administrator. I'm starting to transition from a tactical leadership positions into strategic and institutional leadership. And so the theory is that I don't necessarily need to know everything there is to know about being an ACS tech or an aviation technician or weapons, because really what I'm doing is personnel management. So that's what happened. Anyways, flash forward a few more years, I eventually got promoted to the rank of Master Warrant Officer. I did that for a little bit more time. And in January of 2021, I decided to retire. Part of that was due to a Master of Arts in Leadership program I had started 2 years prior at Royal Roads University, located in Victoria, British Columbia, our West Coast. And this was kind of a catalyzing moment for me, because in the military, as you can imagine, leadership is very lead with your head. It's very directive. There's attempts to be transformative, but it's difficult just by the very nature of what the military is trying to do. So when I started this master's degree program at a civilian university, all of a sudden they were very focused on leading with your heart and how to understand that aspect of it. And that really struck a chord with me, but I recognized that I couldn't do one or the other. I had to do both. And that realization really helped. So as I was moving forward and I was doing my different stuff, I'm trying to figure all these different things out. And I was trying to find ways to how to further this thought of leading with your heart and leading with your mind, and when to do that. As I was doing all of those types of things, I started getting all of this new information talking about, systems thinking and complex problems, these different things. And I kept thinking to myself, gee, I sure wish I'd heard about systems thinking back when I was a new leader, or I sure wish I'd heard about that when I was new. And that theme kept coming up. And at the same time that was happening, it came time to start thinking about a research paper and a knowledge product for my program. And I said to myself, well, maybe I can make a podcast to do the knowledge product, just to even see if I had the ability to do that, because I'd never done any editing or those types of things.
Yeah.
So sure enough, I did that. That worked great. And next thing I know, I was like, I said, okay, I can do this, but I still didn't know what the theme was going to be. But then it dawned on me. Well, I kept saying to myself, I sure wish I had heard about this. I sure wish I had heard about that back when I was a new leader. And Trench Leadership, a podcast from the front, was born. And the whole goal of the podcast is to help emerging leaders just lead in those tactical environments where there tend to be small teams of 7 to 10. And we try and do that on the show by providing some advice, some inspiration, and take away practical tools. Doesn't happen on every episode. It's just too difficult in some cases. But that's what we try and do. And through time, you and I eventually hooked up, and here we are.
Yeah. So I think that's awesome. And it's really applicable to most of my listeners, which are in tech, because when you look at, technology teams, they're typically, you working if you're in agile development, you're working in scrum teams of 5 to 7 people. So you're looking at those smaller teams. And a lot of people think, well, I got to be a boss or a manager to be a leader, but that's not the case. You can lead, at any level. And especially in those what we call self-organizing teams that you kind of work together, people are going to have to pick up leadership roles and abilities at different times. And it may not be, a planned one where you have a whole lot of training. So I think it's important to listen to podcasts like yours and mine and pick up some of those things that us and our guests have kind of learned about along the way, either through hardships or experience or through education as well.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is, through our experiences or whatnot, one of the things I've heard from people who have listened to the show has come back and they said, okay, I'm not alone. Mm-hmm. I'm not the first person to have experienced being nervous, or, imposter syndrome is a very popular thing to talk about, right? But hearing other people going through that, especially not someone that's necessarily a friend or a family member, someone who is completely impartial, go, okay, yeah, this is all right. This is a big thing. I can do this. It's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, it's one of those things where you kind of look at it from the outside and you think, oh, that person just has it all together. They got all the skills and I just don't have that. But in reality, it's one of those things it's a learned thing. Like if I watch someone ride a bike for the first time, I think, well, they just have that. I don't realize that, no, they had to fall a whole bunch and figure it out. And, it's an acquired thing that comes over time. We just see the end product and assume that's the whole thing. We miss the whole behind the scenes work that went into getting there.
Oh yeah, 100%. So it happens to be that right now, one of the other reasons I released from the military was I recognized that my career trajectory, I was doing quite well, and things were not going to slow down. They were only going to get more hectic. And I realized that the things that my passions outside of the military that I really wanted to do, I was not going to have time to do them in the next 10 or 15 years. So what I ended up doing was retiring so I could pursue some of these passions. And one of those is getting back into being a private pilot. And when I got back into it, I already had my license and I was relearning some of the training you have to do. And that was all fine and dandy. But one of the things was, of course, the landings. And what I noticed was that when I got back into it, I was getting really frustrated with myself that I just couldn't stick that perfect soft landing. And I was like, what is going on here? Why can't I figure this out? I've done this hundreds and hundreds of times, but I can't figure this out. It had been years since I'd flown. And my instructor, who flies 5-6 times a day, was sticking these perfect landings when he's showing me. And I was getting really down on myself. And he actually had to remind me, this is what I do all the time. You need to give yourself the time to figure it out, and it'll come together, but you just need to be a little easier on yourself, and it will just magically come together. And once I settled down and I had that bit of that reset moment, really, not the next landing. I'd love to say the next landing was perfect. Actually, the next landing was terrible, but very shortly afterwards, the landings became very consistently strong and soft and exactly what they need to be. So it was good.
Yeah, and I think that's the importance that people might not get, is that it takes time. It's not going to be immediate. You don't listen to one episode of a podcast and jump out there and get everything right. No, you've got to learn along the way and figure things out. And I was curious from your guests, what are some of the most insightful things that you've learned that you're still learning as a leader?
That is a great question. So there are one major theme that comes up all the time, regardless of what the topic is. And on the show, I've had I have a very diverse group of topics, a very diverse group of guests. And we talk about anything from like active listening to how to have a hard conversation to just reminding people that they're not alone. We talk about, how to present yourself in a meeting to look like you're ready to go, or not, even if you're not feeling like that internally. But one of the things that we come up with all the time, the constant theme, would be understanding the why of something. It is so easy to get the information now versus 20, 30 years ago, pre-internet, or when the internet was very new. People, if you don't provide the why to something, people will just go and find it. They'll go to Google, and the first hit that comes up becomes the truth, regardless of whether or not that's the case. So it's very important. What we've found is for emerging leaders to understand, to give full explanations about why something is going. And of course, if the time isn't available to do that because something is rushed, that's okay too. Just explain, right now we don't have the time to give an explanation, but I will do that further down the road, or whatever the terminology might be.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. What made you decide to go and get a master's in leadership after retiring from the military, or what made that decision that a master's of arts in leadership is something that I want to do?
So I was actually still in the military when I had applied for the program. So how it worked out was I was doing one of my jobs, and one of my colleagues was talking to me about this program, and he was getting close to the end of it. And I wasn't paying too much of attention because, he said it was a master's degree. And I, like most people, had just assumed that meant that I needed to have an undergrad degree, which I don't have. And he could see that he was losing me during the conversation. And that's when he told me that he didn't have an undergrad. And actually how people are accepted into the program is based off of a board sits, and they look at your professional and personal life skills, and that board makes a decision based off of that, not simply an educational background. So I applied, and away I went. And I will say, when I first applied to the program, the goal of it was to get those post-nominals, to put them at the end of my name, to help further my career in the military. That was the number one goal, to basically get through the program. But as I got going into the program, I quickly realized that there was so much more out there and so many other possibilities. And that shift really was a main focus of, all of a sudden, okay, maybe I need to go do other things. Now, what I want to use the degree for is to be able to help people understand that they can be strong leaders, and they don't need to have all kinds of education, that most of us have it inside of us. And if it's not a natural type of thing to get in front of people and lead groups, then it's something that we can teach and we can learn. And that's kind of what I'm hoping to do now.
Yeah, no, I think that's really cool. And definitely one of those things that we can teach and can learn. And I think one other thing we need to make sure we also talk about is the fact that you're always learning. You're near the end of your military career and decided, hey, I want to learn something new. I'm going to, or continue to learn what I've already been learning, and use that to teach other people, to continue to grow myself and others. And I think that's a really cool transition and a cool thing to do as well. What kind of cool things have you seen come out of this so far?
Out of the podcast or the leadership?
The whole thing, the whole process of, you're changing careers here, right? You're retiring from one thing, you're starting something totally new. And yet there's a lot of bleed over, right? There's a lot of the same things that you've learned in both areas. I'm just curious of what are some of the really cool moments or experiences that you've had going through this?
Well, so some of the really amazing moments I've had. So I still have a day job I need to do because I've got to pay the bills. I have a 19-year-old daughter who desperately wants to be a veterinarian, and she's working pretty hard towards that. So I suspect I'm going to have to keep working for a while yet, and that's okay. That's okay. But what's really cool, I think, is just how people have recognized the difference in how I've chosen to lead different groups or different things. They can see that I'm more, on a personal level, I'm more open-minded to seeing another person's perspective, or able to look at a challenge in a new light and more all-encompassing, if that makes more sense. Professionally, it's the job that I'm doing now. It's for a company named Callion, and I'm what's called a contract manager. And it's very similar to the last role I had in the military, where I take care of people and I take care of contracts. So what was quite helpful, what was really cool for me, was when you're in the military, you talk to people a certain way, you think a certain way, and then all of a sudden I was in a completely different environment. It was very, very strange to me, and I was able to look at this education that I had, this formal education I had just received, and say, okay, I can use this to help create the type of connections I need to with these. At the time, I was still thinking with those civilians, and so that made that transition easier. And that was actually a big moment for me, because I was able to say, okay, I can do this. Because even though I had attained a really good rank in the military, I was quite successful and whatnot, still I was basically starting over in this new world, and I didn't know how I was going to fit in, or even if I would fit in. But I was able to use my life education to help me see that, no, you can do this. It's okay. And
I had a question. Yeah, I have a question when it comes to that. So the transition from military to civilian life and the leadership differences between that, because we know there's some simulators, but there's also some differences. What are some of the biggest or starkest differences that you've noticed in that transition period?
Let's say, I'd say the biggest difference is in how military people communicate and versus how the civilian industries communicate. One of the examples I love to use all the time is when I was in the military, and I still do it to this day. I think I'm going to reword that. I don't do it anymore because of my experiences so far. But so the example is this, it'll make more sense in a second. In the military, email is not a communication tool. It's a tool to send information, right? Whereas in the civilian industry, I found that it's a communication tool. So an example would be when I was in the military, I would send an email saying, good day, I require this information no later than close of business, 1600 hours, and then my signature block, and that would be it. And there was nothing wrong with that. That was just the way business was done. No one was taking it, no one was reading into that, because that's just the way it was done. So flash forward into my new career, and I'm knowing that I need to soften the tone already. My email sounded more along the lines of, hello, I require this information by the end of the day, because I do. I hope you're having a good day. Regards, Simon Kardynal, and away it would go. And that went on for a couple of weeks. And all of a sudden I got this email from my boss saying, Simon, we need to talk. And he says, we're chatting. And he explains to me, okay, you really need to tone down your emails. They need to be a little softer. You don't need to create a story, but you certainly need to be more open and giving a sense of being more open when you're sending your emails. And I was genuinely confused. I'm like, I don't know what the problem is. I said, have a good day. And right. Yeah. And so we chatted a little bit about that. So that's probably the biggest difference I've seen, is just how information is relayed and how to adjust to that.
Yeah, I do think there's definitely, I don't want to say it's a lot of fluff, but there's a lot of softness that goes around the edges, right? You round off those edges during your communication. You want to make sure that you share a little bit of the, how are things going, give the person an opportunity to respond back, a little bit more of the why as well, which I think is, one of the topics that we talked about before is why you're doing the things that you're doing.
Oh, very much so. If another thing I wouldn't do is I would never respond to an email. If I was considered that the topic was done, I wouldn't respond by like, hey, great, that sounds great, thanks. I would just, move on to the next thing. And people were getting all offended because I wasn't rounding out this email. And I didn't even know what was going on. Now that I understand that, I definitely see the importance of it. but I try and blend a bit of the two. I still, we're still all very busy. So it's an interesting balance.
Yeah, because you don't want to waste somebody's time, but you also want to acknowledge that you heard them.
Exactly. And that acknowledgement is one of the other major points that keeps coming up in a lot of the different topics I have with various guests, is just a simple acknowledgement, a simple, genuine acknowledgement. That's probably a better way to put that, is really, really important. And it will carry through the hard times. If people understand that we're all in a tough spot and whatnot, we acknowledge that, it goes a long way to helping the team stay more cohesive.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to, what you learned in your master's program, master's of art and leadership, and what you've seen applied to military leadership, what are some of the things that the military is doing absolutely right that you can talk about?
Oh yeah, for sure. So some of the things the military is doing absolutely right. I can of course can only speak for the Canadian military, but what I can say is what I've noticed is that the US military and the Canadian military, how we approach our leadership, our professional military leadership programs, is very, very similar. And in fact, we have quite a few exchange programs where Canadians will go to the US US schools, and Americans will come to the Canadian leadership schools. So just to make sure we're talking the same language, because our two countries, our two militaries are so intertwined in when we do operations. So, but one of the things that I've recognized the military does quite well is understanding how to move forward and trying to adjust with what new doctrine might be out there. They might be a little slow to get the doctrine out there or the understanding of how things are going, but once things do pick up, they're very good at getting that full comprehension out to the various leaders out there. So that's important, because in a large military like the United States, all the leaders need to be talking the same way and thinking the same way to be able to have that standardized approach to things. Understanding that leadership is not a standardized approach. It's striking that tough balance.
Right, but getting the word out there and communicating, I guess, as transparently as possible, as quickly as possible, is one of those skills that you see the military doing very well.
Exactly, and one of the other things that the military does very, very well, and most large companies will emulate this, is the practice of standard operating procedures, or SOPs. They have been doing that with operations orders for decades and decades and decades. It has evolved over time, and it's a tried, tested, and true system to move large projects. And many, many, many large companies will do something very similar, because they understand it's efficient, it's effective, and it's clearly done, if it's done properly.
Yeah. So how important is it to have those SOPs kind of written down and typed up or something like that, but documented in a way that you can pass along to the next person, versus just being in someone's head and that domain knowledge? Because I've seen several times, especially with smaller and medium-sized companies, where a department will have all that knowledge in one person's head or in a couple of people's head, versus typed up and documented in a way that's transmissible.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely vital to have that written down somewhere. So when someone eventually does come in, then someone will have a guide about how to keep going forward. And we've all seen it, like with your example of people that have been, holding that information in their mind for whatever reason. It doesn't really matter why, but when all of a sudden they go away, they go on vacation, they get sick, they just retire, and there's this huge gap. So if that information is not written down somewhere, it's lost, it's gone. And that causes a lot of problems. It's dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to, you mentioned earlier that when you made that transition, I guess, from the military and took a job doing something very similar to what you did in the military, but on the civilian side, you had the epiphany moment where I can do this. Did you suffer any from the imposter syndrome that you've talked about before when you got in there?
I'll tell you, I suffered from that. There's two times when I suffered from that really, really strongly. The first one was when when I was doing the master's degree program. The way the program is set up, it's a 2-year program. It's a blended online versus residential. Mm-hmm. So everything is online except for 2 weeks in year 1 and 2 weeks in year 2. You actually go to Victoria and you go to the university and you do the residential portion. So leading up to the first residential portion, I had convinced myself, without anything other than my own thoughts, that I did not deserve to be in the program, that I wasn't smart enough, that people were going to look down on me. And in British Columbia, it's kind of regarded as our more liberal area, one of our more liberal areas. And so I'd been also convinced myself that everyone was really going to hate me because I really detest me because I was in the military and I was all things against, you know, the environment and all these different things. I had just made this amazing story inside my mind based off of nothing other than the story I had built up. So much so that I actually made myself sick. Like I gave myself the common cold. I got there and quickly realized that that was not the case. People were very welcoming and very open armed towards me, and things went very well. So that happened. And then when I started realizing I was going to retire and into this job, I had built it up in my head that I was not going to be a good fit for this role because I was in the military and this was a civilian industry and it's a for-profit organization. And I've never had to worry about budgets or any of these things. And I just didn't deserve to be there and yada, 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 even though I had gone against, it was a competition to get the role and I won. I had that in my head. So the nice thing is that I proved myself wrong. But my thought on imposter syndrome in general is I don't think, and I'm generalizing and I realize this, I don't think most people ever fully get rid of it. It's always there. It's in how we manage that feeling. Yeah. An example for me would be my podcast. Every time I talk to someone about it, I'm expecting them to tell me it's a waste of time. Every single time. It doesn't matter how great the episode was or what they're saying to me. I'm waiting for them to say, Simon, why are you wasting this? It's never happened. And I don't think it ever will happen, but it's there. I just don't let that be the thing that's going to stop me from making the show.
Yeah. No, I get that. And I agree with you 100% when it comes to, I don't think it ever goes away. I think you'll always have that next thing, you know, there's levels to everything. And even if you get good at one thing, you're going to think the next thing, you're going to struggle with, right? The next thing you're going to have to worry about that someone else is better than you. I mean, I still have this fear that, you know, HR is going to walk in one day and say, yeah, you're really not qualified for this job. I don't know how you got here, how you tricked us so long. You know?
Exactly.
We've been noticing you've been Googling how to do the things that you're supposed to know how to do anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, because everybody Googles everything, right? But
yeah, that's right.
But in reality, everybody's here. And there was a book that I read many years ago. Trying to remember the name of it. Notes to a Software Team Lead. And it was about this one guy's first job of being a manager. And it ended with him saying, what I've discovered in leadership, there is no experts, there's only us. And what he meant by that is that there is nobody that really knows everything. Everybody's learning. And that's the whole point. And it's just continuously learning and figuring it out and realizing that you're never going to know it all. And that's okay.
That is so true. And it's such an important lesson for people to understand that we're always going to be figuring things out. We're always going to come across something that we don't know how to deal with, but we can rely on ourselves and our knowledge and our friends and our colleagues to get us through it. Even yesterday, I was up flying and I was doing something in Ottawa called the City Tour. And it's basically, I'm up flying around the downtown core and I have to talk to a whole bunch of different different towers and terminals, depending on where I'm at. And I was building this up in my head that this was a big deal, that they were just all of the air traffic controllers were going to know that, oh, Simon, this guy, Simon Kardynal, he shouldn't be a pilot. We're just going to get on the radio and tell him to get out of the air based off of nothing. You know, I got a few hundred hours of flying experience and I know how to do these things, but I still built that up in my head. So how did I fight that? How did I stop myself from going down that rabbit hole? I studied more. I made sure I understood where I needed to be when I was there, and I paid attention when I was flying. And not that I'd never not pay attention, of course, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, I think that's it. Whenever at least for me, whenever I get those moments is, all right, so what can I do to put in the work so that I don't have those feelings anymore? Or what can I do to make sure that I'm not phoning it in, you know, that I'm putting in the work that needs to be done ahead of time. Like you talked about, you know, paying extra attention, doing something a little bit more than you normally feel like you should do, just to make sure. I know, you know, one thing I always get nervous every year. You mentioned budgets. I have budget season where you have to go in and present my budget and, you know, ask for more things and things like that. And I always get nervous that there's something that I get asked about that I don't know. You know, so I make sure every line of my budget, not only do I know it, but I know how to answer questions about it. You know, I don't want anything in my budget that I cannot definitively ask about. So I'll spend an extra week just reading through every line of the budget, making sure, you know, and if I don't know, I'll call someone on my team. Hey, what was this for again? What exactly do we use it for? Just to make sure.
Yeah, exactly. And having, as long as we all prepare as much as we're content with, that's all we can really ask.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mistakes are going to happen. And that's a big thing for people to remember is mistakes are going to happen. It's not the end of the world. I'll say negligence is different, of course. Mistakes are going to happen. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Mistakes are going to happen. And how do you think people should handle it whenever they do make a mistake? Let's say I go into my budget meeting and I got busy and maybe I decided not to review the CapEx budget. I only looked at the operational budget. So I go in there and I think, well, you never ask questions about CapEx budget. So I just go in there and the board should be fine. And then they do ask questions. I don't know the answers. How do you think I should handle that when I leave?
Well, I think first and foremost, if you do get found, how do I word this? Just honesty is important. I don't have the answer right now, but always offer some type of solution. My recommendation would be to offer some type of solution in that I don't have the answer right now, but I'm going to find out and I'll have an answer to you by the end of the day tomorrow or whatever. I'll get that for you. More often than not, people are more willing to accept that we just made a mistake if we're honest about it than trying to hide it or just slough it off.
Yeah.
We're going to miss stuff. Things are going to happen. It's just the way it's going to be.
And whenever I let's say I'm honest about it, I fess up, I get it on back. How do I not beat myself up too much about that?
That's very, very hard to do, especially if it's something that you're invested in. But my recommendation would be to play it back in your mind. Okay, what could I have maybe done that could have done this differently so I could have avoided that mistake going down in the future to avoid that? That's an idea to try and take some proactive approach to, grow and learn from that. But at the same time as reminding yourself of that is some people that, a sticky in front of them says, mistakes are going to happen. That's okay. It's not the end of the world. And it sounds nice and easy to say, remind yourself of that. But the trick is with those types of reminders is to genuinely believe it. Mistakes are going to happen. No one is perfect. And that's okay. That's a big part of it. Okay.
Absolutely. I think that's one thing that we have to continue to remind ourselves that, when we look on social media or we like I spend more time on LinkedIn than any other social media because I don't know, I feel like I can get value out of that, a little bit more than I can some of the other ones. But even there, people only share their highlights. They're not sharing their struggles. They're not sharing the times they messed up. We'll share how, we won this award or something like that, but we're not going to talk about the times where, we came in over budget and late on a project. Right. So just understand that for every one of those successes, there's going to be some failures behind there too.
Exactly. And every one of those failures is another way to learn to get you to the successes.
Yes.
It really, truly is. It's an all in how we use the failures to get us to the successes. It's all part of it.
Yeah, I think that's important to know too, is that every time you fail, that's a learning opportunity, and don't waste it.
Exactly. And that's exactly it. We hear that all the time. This is a learning opportunity, but it really, truly is. And it's an all in how we choose to look at these things going forward.
Yeah. So what's been the most fun thing about doing a podcast, and why do you enjoy doing it?
The most fun thing about the podcast is when I come into an episode or something, or I'm getting ready to record with someone I don't really know, and I have it in my head how I think the episode is going to go, and it goes in a completely different direction.
Yeah.
I love that. It's difficult because I've got a plan in my mind about how I want to go forward. And the military side of my brain is say, okay, at this time, we're going to do this, this, and this, and this, and this. But it's always amazing to say, okay, well, we didn't go anywhere near this particular point that I thought we were going to get to. And it's fun to see how we got there. And I love interacting with different people and seeing how we all look at the same thing, but from different lenses. And that in turn opens up my mind to how I look at things. So yeah, it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I think different perspectives is really cool. And I think it's really, for me, it's been really fun just to talk to different people that I'd probably never have met in real life, or talk to them if I didn't do a show. So I think that's one of the really cool benefits from doing a podcast. Like even if there's no money to be made or anything like that, if it's just about communicating with cool people and maybe helping someone else out there that listens, I think those are worth everything that we do.
Oh, that's exactly it. Like the other day, I recorded an episode with a lady named Megumi Miki, and she is in Australia, and she just recently wrote a book talking about quietly Quietly Powerful, which talks about the power of introverts. And I'm not traditionally an introverted type of person. So it was interesting to see her perspective and how we talk about that and how we could tie these different things together. And I'm in Canada. This woman's in Australia. There's like a 14-hour time zone difference or something. And yet we found a connection there, and we built a really cool episode. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Whenever I talk to anybody from Australia, I always ask them what the future's like, because they're just half a day ahead of us.
Yeah, exactly. I do the same thing. Like, really? Tell me what's going to happen tomorrow. Yeah, I do the same thing. Yeah. What are the stocks doing?
Exactly. So how can people find out more about your show, and how can they listen and connect with you?
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate that. So I do have a website at trenchleadership.ca, and the show Trench Leadership, a podcast from the front, is on all of the major podcast feeds and a whole bunch of the smaller ones: Spotify, Apple, Listen Notes, Stitcher. You get the idea. Google. And as well, I'm also the podcast. I have social media accounts on Facebook. I use LinkedIn more than I do pretty much anything else. And I do have an Instagram account as well. And that's where everyone can find out about what's coming up.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And I'll link that up in the show notes too at geekleader.com, so people can connect with you there. And Simon, man, I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to having you as a guest on my show.
Awesome. Yeah.
If you enjoyed that episode, please leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also, don't forget to check out merch. We have some t-shirts that I've designed that are on at geekleader.com. You can click on the merchandise section there and check that out. And also, don't forget about the books from our guests. So if you like this guest and other guests that have written books, please go ahead and check that out at geekleader.com. I would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too.